Item due is recess to the County Ditch Authority. I'll call the meeting to order. And I'd like to welcome everyone this afternoon. The purpose of this meeting is to receive comments and testimony from all parties interested in the unauthorized work on and damage to Meeker County Ditch 17. Please note that our proceedings this afternoon are being recorded and notes are being taken by our staff. The order of business for this hearing will be as follows. First, Ms. Jansen, the Drainage Authority's attorney, will explain the process which has brought us to the public hearing and the purpose of this hearing. Following her testimony, the Meeker County Engineer, Phil Schmalz, and the Meeker County Ditch Inspector, Mac Locken, will review the previous work on County Ditch 17 and the investigation of the unauthorized work and damage. Following Meeker County staff, Mr. Lewis of Houston Engineering Incorporated will review the restoration report for County Ditch 17. After hearing from Mr. Lewis, Mr. Tyler Service, the landowner, this board preliminary determined to be responsible for the unauthorized work and damage to the County Ditch 17 at its public meeting on November 19th, 2024, will be given the opportunity to present to the board. Finally, we'd like to hear any other interested person's comments on the unauthorized work and damage. If you would like to make a comment when the public comment period is open, please come up to the podium. When I recognize you, please state your name and address for the record. If you have specific concerns concerning the proceedings and the restoration report, we may ask our legal counsel, engineer, or staff to respond. If you have anything in writing you wish to submit, you can provide that to me during the public comments. Would any of the board members wish to offer any further remarks before we begin?
Not at this time from me.
None.
No. Okay. All right, Hannah.
Good afternoon, board. As Commissioner Schiffelbein stated, the purpose of the public hearing today is for the Drainage Authority to take testimony from Drainage Authority staff and other interested parties regarding the unauthorized work on and damage to Meeker County Ditch 17. Previously, the Drainage Authority received information from Meeker County staff that Tyler Service, a benefited landowner on CD 17, performed or otherwise unauthorized work on CD 17 drainage system. As a result, the Drainage Authority engaged Rinke Noonan, its legal counsel, to investigate the unauthorized work, whether the unauthorized work damaged CD 17, and to explore options for restoration. Rinke Noonan hired an engineer to investigate the extent of the unauthorized work and determine the short-term and long-term concerns for the drainage system. On the advice of its attorney, the Drainage Authority appointed Joe Lewis of Houston Engineering to complete the restoration report. On November 19th, 2024, at its regularly scheduled and posted meeting, the Meeker County Board of Commissioners convened as the Drainage Authority to make a preliminary determination of whether unauthorized work was completed on CD 17, whether the unauthorized work damaged the drainage system, whether Mr. Service is responsible for the unauthorized work, and the appropriate restoration methodology options for the unauthorized work, and whether Mr. Service should be responsible for the costs incurred by the drainage system to restore CD 17. The Drainage Authority determined Mr. Service as the responsible party preliminarily for the unauthorized work, and that the damage did occur to the CD 17 drainage system. Further, the board set today for a public hearing to take testimony from all interested parties and to make a final determination as to the questions previously stated. The Drainage Authority today will take testimony from staff and from the appointed engineer about the unauthorized modification of CD 17 and the proposal for restoration. Mr. Service has been invited to give comment and to give testimony and any evidence he has as to the preliminary determinations. Following Mr. Service, there is the opportunity for other benefited landowners and the public to make comments to this board. The board may ask staff or legal counsel for clarification or rebuttal to any of the public comments or Mr. Service's testimony as well. After a review of the final record that we are making today, the board has 4 options. First, if the board determines that the CD-17 has been modified from its as-constructed specifications without permission, that restoration is necessary, and that Mr. Service is responsible for the cost incurred to restore CD-17, the board may adopt the findings and orders that is consistent with the record today, and those have been created based on the preliminary reports and the preliminary information gathered. And Cale Van Bruggen from Rinky Noonan is in attendance today and is updating those preliminary findings in order as testimony is being brought and given today. So the board has the option today to adopt those findings in order. Second, if the board desires to adopt findings in order at a different date, it may do so by recessing this meeting for a later date and specifying what the findings and orders that should be drafted by legal counsel. And then those would be adopted at the later hearing. If the board determines that more information is needed before it decides what to order and what to specify in its findings in order, the board may direct staff to conduct additional investigation and recess the meeting until a later date. Finally, no action is needed if the board determines that the evidence presented does not support the need to restore CD-17. So with that, I would look to the board if there's any questions at this time for me.
No questions? Okay, thank you, Anna. At this point, if Phil could come forward and talk about his investigation.
Good afternoon. Phil Schmalz, Meeker County Public Works Director. Somewhat serving to bridge the gap here as we had some staff turnover with their ditch inspector position as this was all happening. So I put together a little bit of information just to run through a brief history, a summary of what happened. So I didn't go all the way back to the beginning of time, but I did start on June 1st of 21. That is when the redetermination of benefits was ordered on this system, so a county-owned process. And then the adopted benefits were completely wrapped up in March of 22. After that, then the county, through its ditch inspector, solicited contractors to complete a couple of works on the system. It was in 2 primary parts. In May of 2022, there was a cookie cutter machine that did cleaning through slough areas, cattail areas, places where an excavator could not work very effectively. And then in December 22 through January of 23, there was excavator work done via contractor to clean out open ditch sections, things that we could access. October, November of 2023, the county's contractor was returned to further level the spoils. And then January 29th is when additional work was completed that was identified by the property owner, or identified by the county, done by the property owner. Some pictures to give you an idea of what we're talking about. It's kind of small here, but way down in the lower right, you'll see a yellow box, and you can identify the north-south road on the right-hand side as CSA 34, and the east-west road, I can't read, but CD-17 runs east from 34 after it crosses 34. And if you look at the middle of that system, the red lines is our county ditch. When I talk about slough and cattail areas, you can somewhat identify where those are. Once you get a ways away from 34, it goes out into the slough. That's where the cookie cutter machine happened. That's not the area of concern. Here's zooming into that same area that was in yellow. This is the area of concern where excavator work was completed by the county's contractor, and then later unauthorized work was completed. This is an image of a 2021 aerial to give you an idea what it looked like from an aerial view before any work was completed. And then I can toggle to 2024, which is after the work was completed. Not a lot to note, just to see that that is the same area. You'll see there was a bend by 34 that was removed with the private work as part of the work done by the private entity or their contractor. An image just to give you an idea what things look like, boots on the ground. This is by CASA 34 after the county's cleaning was completed, before the private work was completed. We're by CASA 34 looking westerly. That's that bend we could identify in the aerial. If you'll look, no work was completed on the north side of the ditch. On the south side, the contractor dipped out of the physical ditch depression, left the bank vegetation intact, and then placed the spoils behind that bank vegetation. This is a picture taken January 29th, about the same spot. This is standing up more on the road shoulder, facing the same direction. You can see the ditch has been straightened. The ditch bank has been removed. The vegetation that did exist next to the ditch bank, off in the distance, you can see a little bit of it remaining on the south side, which is to the left, but most of it is gone at that point already. Some images after the work was completed, just kind of seeing some of the runoff, the ditch itself, a lot of sediment already back in the system. We had some significant rains that spring. This is what it looked like when levels came up. We lost a lot of our cross-section of the ditch, so the water spreads out wide instead of staying close to or within the ditch system or within the ditch itself. Pictures of some of the erosion. This is just near CASA 34 that we were experiencing shortly after the work. This is spring of 2024. All that soil that's moved is now in the ditch system. That's all I had. For a little more information, I'll turn it to Mac Loken, our ditch inspector.
Does anybody have any questions for Phil at this moment from the board? Otherwise, we'll turn right to Mac. Okay, thanks, Phil.
Mac Loken, Meeker County Ditch Inspector. I'll give just a little bit more of a brief overview, and then we'll turn it over to Joe Lewis from Houston Engineering. Around 1,300 feet worth of County Ditch 17 had been altered. County Ditch 17 banks were pulled back and the spoils were deposited into nearby wetlands adjacent to the ditch. These ditch banks were designed to hold back overland water flow with the purpose of reducing runoff and erosion, which also limits future maintenance costs on the systems. With the recent work conducted, County Ditch 17 is now open to severe erosion and soil deposition. Houston Engineering took 2 sets of elevation shots and cross sections of this 1,300-foot stretch of ditch, the first one being in May and the second being in November. Their data indicates an influx of 2 to 2.5 feet of sediment due to erosion caused by the recent excavations within roughly a 6-month time period. Some small gullies have been created from overland water flow, and these gullies will continue to bring sediment into County Ditch 17 unless a buffer and a ditch bank is reestablished. By reestablishing both a ditch bank and a buffer strip, we can reduce erosion and soil deposition and limit future maintenance costs in this system. So that's what I got. So thank you.
Any questions for Mac? Otherwise, we'll move on to Joe.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll just wait here a minute until we get the slides pulled up. So what I'm going to do today is just run through contents basically of what's in the engineer's report or restoration report. Starting with some location and background, which was largely covered by both Phil and Mac. And then we'll spend some time talking about how we arrived at a conclusion or an estimate of what the prior conditions were, and prior meaning before the landowner alterations, because that is important for us to consider when we look at what's the impact of the current condition versus the official shape and condition of the drainage system, the authorized shape of the CD17 drainage system in this segment. And then we'll talk about what those impacts and concerns are with the modifications, and then cover our restoration alternatives that we present in the report, and then our recommendation. So again, Section 25 of Harvey Township, just north of the city of Litchfield. We do have a significant drainage area coming in through this portion of the channel, just over 30 square miles. That includes the city of Litchfield and some sizable water bodies there, including Lake Ripley. And there are, a number of significant wetland complexes that will, meter out that runoff before it reaches this site. This is, a more detailed version of what was already up there in Phil's presentation. We looked a little closer at the aerial photography that we had available along with the site photographs and did a more detail into this footprint or extent of the alterations. So you see, and that's the red area. So you see on the south side, there is a shorter extent. The total length there from east to west is approximately 1,300 feet that was altered, where the channel was altered. That full length alteration happened on the north side. Only about half of that happened on the south side. And this was pointed out too already, but on the far east side, there was straightening of the channel that happened where you see that little dip in the blue line just west of CASA 34. So, from here, we started looking at, how do we approximate the prior condition? So, first, one thing we looked at was, what do we have from before? We have aerial photos, obviously, but I think this image from Bing Maps street side view gives a decent depiction of what it looked like. So you see it doesn't stick out as overly wide. The spoil banks and surrounding topography adjacent to the channel are, I think, pretty well covered up by that vegetation. Since this photo was taken in midsummer, a lot of vegetation, it's dense. You really can't see the elevation changes beside the channel. But it does give us, a decent image of what it looked like beforehand. This same image was in Phil's slides, so I want to point out a couple of the same things, but we see that vegetation on the side slope is undisturbed at that time, so it remains stable. We're not going to have a high risk of that eroding following this repair. We can start to estimate, and once we start talking about our field survey, we can start to estimate the dimensions of what this was, and I'll get to that here in a few minutes in more detail, but we do estimate a 4 to 6 foot bottom width to this channel and 1.5 to 1 side slopes, meaning for every 1 foot vertical you go outward from the channel, you move 1.5 feet horizontally. So it just relates how steep that slope is on the side of the channel. And I'll point out again, on the left side, this is where the spoil was placed from that county-led repair and leveled. In this photo that our survey team took in May of this year, we are now on the far western side as we enter that public water basin downstream of the altered area. This is what the channel looked like there and what it still looks like today. But you see on the left-hand side, you see that strip of kind of green vegetation, so you don't have that dead cattail vegetation there because spoil was placed on top of that and you've had some new growth coming up through there, and it's less likely that that's going to have that cattail vegetation grow up there over time too, because it's higher in elevation compared to the channel and the saturated conditions on the lower ground. This might be getting a little repetitive now, but I just have one more slide on the pre-condition. This is taken last month, again on that downstream side, but now looking east, upstream towards that altered section. And this view gives us just the unaltered condition of the channel again. So again, a relatively narrow channel, some higher ground immediately adjacent to the channel where spoils have been placed historically and used for repair maintenance work. And from all those photos, we have approximated a channel cross-section that includes the size of the channel and also approximate size of the spoil banks and heights of the spoil banks, and show it tying into the natural ground outward from the channel. And in the report and in a later slide here, we'll overlay the current surveyed cross-section with this, and you see that change that occurred from the alteration. So again, 4 to 6 foot bottom width. At the top of the channel towards the spoil bank level, we have an estimate of 15 to 20 feet of top width, meaning that, water is moving within inside of that full width when the ditch is full or partially full. And a total depth of 3 to 4 feet is our estimate. And this is verified at least partially by survey of the channel taken downstream, immediately downstream of this altered segment, and that has very similar characteristics to this estimate. So I have 2 photos here. I want to show, this is not CD17, but from other parts of the state, other drainage systems that show, just the common practice of when you do a repair, you're placing spoil on existing spoils, and that creates this corridor to access the ditch in the future for inspection and minor maintenance work and, full system repairs work also. And I think this next photo shows a shallower ditch where that spoil is, strategically placed to maintain that corridor, keep that corridor, have a higher working area to access for inspection and maintenance, like I said. Another, photo from during the work earlier this year. I included this one to show that remaining spoil bank on the left side, which is the south side, because again, it's standing near CSAH 34 looking west. So we see, it's hard to estimate with a lot of accuracy, but I'd say we're within that 1 to 2 foot range of what height of material is being removed and, pulled back away from the channel and spread in a wider width. And, Phil already touched on this one, but you see that we now have something that's wider than 20 feet, 15 to 20 feet. This is probably a 20 to 30 to maybe even 40 feet as you look further away. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these next couple slides. These are from November, so last month, and just shows the limited vegetation that is adjacent to the channel or within the channel. We see on the left side, so this is the north side because we're looking east, we see water out there, after presumably some rainfall. That's going to be difficult to move equipment down for inspection and maintenance. I think in this particular stretch, there still is some remaining spoil bank on that right side or south side. So presumably work could still happen if needed from that south side, but the north side would certainly be challenging. And we move further east here, we're looking west, about midway between this of the altered segment, and we see a lot of bare soils on the right side. We see some vegetation on the left side, but I think a lot of the ground on the right was underwater during wet periods and really limited the vegetation from becoming established naturally. So that just left it exposed to erosion risk. Okay. Again, very similar here. Really no spoils on either side of the ditch, and it would be risky to get in regular equipment out there to do work during a normal or wet period. On this photo, again from November, last month, we see sediment starting to stick out above the water level. And that's in the middle of the channel, and this just gets to the point where there's some sediment that's rapidly filling in here. It is increased that channel bottom, the profile of the system, impacting its efficiency currently. And last photo from last month from CSAH 34, you see that mound of sediment in the middle, just off in the distance there a little bit, and again, a wider channel compared to what those photos were from before the alterations. Now this slide shows our comparison of the cross-section. So the green line is a surveyed cross-section, some 300, 400, 500 feet west of the highway, and that black line is our approximated elevations before the alterations. So we see that give or take 2 feet of spoil bank height was removed and pulled out away from the channel and flattened essentially. And this photo shows our field surveyed profile from May of 2024. That's the dash line. And then the solid line is our estimate of the original depth of the channel and one that you would repair to. So we see on the right side, which is the upstream side near Casad 34, we see a fair amount of material. That's on average 2 feet of depth there. But then the downstream 800 feet, we see less depth, a foot or less. And then we jump to the survey that was done last month. So now we see generally for that whole 12 to 1300 length of alterations, we see 2 to 2.5 feet of material that would be removed during a repair. Okay, so now just to cover our evaluation of the impact on the drainage system capacity or efficiency. So again, like I just said, there's 2 to 2.5 feet of material, so that obviously affects the water levels in the ditch and its ability to how efficiently you can move the water from point A to point B. And that's going to be the case until it's repaired, until that sediment is removed from the bottom. And the conclusion there at the bottom is that these alterations don't necessarily impact the capacity or efficiency of the system if it's repaired. So the next couple slides we'll talk about our concerns about the ability to repair and maintain the system if it's left in its current condition. And I'll back up. Actually, I think I have this on the next slide after this one. I wanted to point out something else, but really, as Mac pointed out, this is a concern until vegetation is really established adjacent to the channel with these slopes and the amount of water that's coming into the ditch from these areas. It's going to be susceptible to continued erosion and filling in the ditch again with sediment. As far as the long-term maintenance concerns, there's the accessibility that we've mentioned. Spoil bank is traditionally used to give that convenient access to inspect and maintain the system, whether it's a minor amount of work, repairing isolated sediment deposits or erosion issues that happen on ditches, or more importantly, or as importantly, on a full system repair, where you're doing a longer length of ditch cleanout. And with the current condition, it's still technically feasible to repair with its current condition, but it becomes more challenging, potentially requiring additional equipment, whether that's mats to have a working platform for equipment to travel up and down the system. And it may even require larger equipment with a longer reach to clean out that channel than it otherwise would with a good spoil bank in place. And a big issue that I see is that you're going to have, with the widened channel, you're going to have shallower depths and lower velocities. So that means you're going to see more of that sediment that reaches the ditch. It's going to stay there. It's not going to get moved on downstream, which is another issue. But I think you're going to see increased vegetation grow within the channel, especially in those kind of normal to dry years. You're going to see cattail vegetation encroach in the channel, and eventually, be a big impact on the efficiency of the system. You heard from Phil that there was repairs done further downstream into the public water, into the large wetland with a cookie cutter, because you couldn't access it with traditional excavation equipment. So I think that's going to be the case here if left alone. And this all kind of points to this is going to be an additional cost for the Drainage Authority, specifically the landowners on the system, to bear the cost to be on top of that maintenance that they otherwise would have to do to a lesser degree. So, in terms of our restoration alternatives, we include 2 alternatives within our report. The first one is to reestablish that southern spoil bank for that 600 to 700 feet on the south side where it was graded out. And then alternative 2 is where you reestablish the spoil bank for the full length on both sides. So 600 to 700 feet on the south side, and then the full 1,200 feet on the north side. And the recommendation would be to proceed with, or to consider alternative 2, as that provides the best access for inspection and maintenance moving forward. And with alternative 1, we do include a recommendation for that option to consider acquiring an easement on the north side just to guarantee access on that north side if you need it. And really you're gonna see a wider width of water, given the current channel there. So you wanna kind of just protect that conveyance in the future, and the vegetated buffer strip, that's a requirement of the drainage system. On the bottom image, that's our depiction of what that cross-section looks like. So that material would be taken back, either from what's been deposited in the channel or what's been leveled out, outward from the channel, and restore that spoil bank, 1 to 2 feet in height. So not a lot of height or a lot of volume of material, but this material, if it's being used on site, it's going to be wet, saturated. It's going to be kind of an issue for the contractor to shape those spoil banks. It's going to be a little challenging, but feasible. And then for both alternatives, priority would be to establish that perennial vegetation as soon as possible to limit that erosion risk, and include either side inlet pipes or swales, controlled swales, to allow water to enter the CD17 channel without causing erosion issues. So the recommendation would be to proceed with alternative 2, as it gives that best access along both sides of the channel and protects the CD17 landowners from additional maintenance costs in the future. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Anybody on the board having questions for Joe? All right, thank you. Tyler?
Good afternoon, board. My name is Tyler. I'm the property owner. I know you guys got all the exhibits, so I'd just like to start from the top and just kind of walk through timeline of events. I think there's some misinformation that was dictated up there. We'll walk through that, and then if you guys got any questions, feel free to ask me. So on Exhibit 1, so I gave you guys all a printout packet. On Exhibit 1, so I kind of want to just recap, because I know the board obviously is aware, but probably the people behind me aren't aware that we had to pay. So when they did the cookie cutter through my property, that they actually severed the property. They severed, I believe, like 17 or 20 acres that they, because of their poor action, and I'm not saying the board, but because of the ditch inspector and the contractor at the time, their poor actions of aligning the ditch and putting the cookie cutter and basically putting the ditch back in its original existing easement, they severed and took a big, about 100-foot curve out into the cattail swamp, severing 17, 20 acres, whatever it was. After settlement with the board, part of that settlement was our offer to the board with Kale, and the board was $10,000, and you guys leveled the spoils. The spoils have always been an issue on this property because they're holding back water, and that's now the goal of the spoils. Or $15,000, and we'll level the spoils ourselves. Multiple emails back and forth, and so that's kind of where this here starts. So as you can see on Exhibit 1, August 25th, email to John, who was the ditch inspector at the time. When will you be leveling the spoils on ditch 17? This needs to be done soon before more rain comes. The way they left my land along the ditch is unacceptable, and this project needs to have level the spoils they excavated. Appreciate it. If you could let me know the schedule on this. Another point in that email, in that chain, is where John notified me about the ditch itself and the amount of material that was still left in the ditch after construction. So I think that's something important to note, that the sediment that's been in the ditch was never constructed right from day one. The ditch inspector was always aware of that, how this was constructed, and we're going to get into and not to jump forward, but exhibit 6 and 7 show the 1904 cross-section of this profile of this ditch. And that ditch in that section was 6 foot wide at the bottom, and I believe a 1-to-1 or 1.5-to-1. It's roughly 15.5 feet or anywhere between 11 and 15 or 16 feet at the top, depending on the depth of that section, going all the way through that cattail swamp. So when they constructed this ditch back in 1904, there was, I mean, it looks like the way it is today. So I think that's something that the board needs to consider and to note. Going forward, Exhibit 2 is September 13th emails. Basically saying, talking with the attorneys, they never came to level the spoils, the $10,000. I gave them a gentleman's agreement. I gave, the board or whoever you want to call it to allow to dump additional spoils that you guys took from other parts of the ditch to dump on my property. And part of the return favor was that when you leveled the spoils, you buried the rest of the stuff that you dumped there along the ditch. That was dictated in here. Here was the two options that we proposed. Like I said, just numerous emails back and forth in regards to the spoils. That number was 27 acres, I apologize, of what they severed when they didn't put that ditch. And so my stance from day one was always I wanted that ditch to go down the original alignment. I didn't want to be paid for additional, severing of the land and taking land. But part of that was we gave the board, we gave the county an easement for both sides. So I know that this alternate one or whatever it is requesting that. There is already an easement going for both sides of the ditch, I believe, to my understanding. Exhibit 3 is October 24th emails, more emails in regards to leveling the spoils on that side of the ditch. Then we get to, so at that point in time, on the October 24th, the county attorney requested a map from me showing me the area of the spoils that I was requesting. That'd be Exhibit 4, showing the map that, and so there was a map that I created at that point in time, and the attorneys gave correct. That showed the area that we wanted the spoils level, that we had concern, because that was part of this stipulation that when it was. On Exhibit 5, and I know I'm going through these pretty fast, but Exhibit 5 was basically the email conversation that they removed the spoils from our settlement agreement because we deem them as complete and acceptable. Now, mind you, January 5th was after this work was done, and the pictures that were shown up there did not show after the contractor leveled the spoils. So the photo that's up there that you see that says that, hey, we left this spoil bank, that is actually incorrect. There was about a less than a foot sliver that was along there that the contractor, because I personally flew into town to meet their contractor 2 separate times to make sure that it was done to my standards before I was gonna sign the documents accepting the $10,000 payment for severing of the land. As far as the north side of the ditch goes, in our regards to that, we leveled the spoils on the north side of the ditch because there's spoils that have, been there, they're holding back water, they're never constructed. And that's really where I get, and I'm gonna jump back to the cross section. But a big problem that I have with how the board, and I think the board really needs to look at future work on these ditches, because obviously as someone that owns, almost a couple thousand acres in Meeker County, I have multiple properties that have ditches in it. We don't take care of the spoils and level them for the landowner to maintain. All we do is we throw the spoils up there, and they do basically a very poor job of leveling it, and then they expect the landowner to maintain that. The water needs to drain. As somebody in the agriculture that's farming it or whatever it is, we need to have the water to drain from the backside, however that is, whether that's slot cuts, whether it's sloped. So for someone to come and say, well, you need to go back and build a berm, 2 reasons I don't feel that that's acceptable to put that on my shoulders is number one, the county leveled the spoils. It was never an issue. This was conversation that went on for 6 months and never was brought to my attention that this is what had to happen in order for the functionality of this ditch. In regards, the ditch itself was never even constructed to that cross-section of that 1904 cross-section. You can go out there right now, and the only part of this ditch that's actually constructed to the plans, other than the depth at the beginning, is the beginning part of this first 1,300 feet, the part that we're talking about. Now go from the next 1,300 feet. It's not constructed to that profile. It's not 6 foot wide at the bottom of the channel. I floated down it. It's probably, you can barely get a John boat down it. So, and that was at high flow in May of this year. So I don't think that, I think there's multiple things that we need to take away from this, today, and to really look, and that is, how did we construct this ditch? And, a lot of us, as someone that contributed to, my portion on this ditch was probably $30,000, the guy that next door paid, whatever this contribution was astronomical. But then here we are, we're spending money that I don't think the people behind me realized that they had part of the payment that they had done was part of that $10,000 that got paid to me for severing of the land. Was the engineering. I mean, who approved the engineering of this instead of having these conversations of what's been done, but yet we're out here still spending money on ditch 17 that people aren't aware of. And it's just an open checkbook that nonstop. At the end of the day, if we would have just built this ditch and done it right from the beginning part, another part that I have a big problem, as someone that's in the industry, in the construction industry, we rarely, and I've had this conversation with Mac, that none of these contractors are using GPS, their accuracy level. So now here you're trying to hold me to an example of accuracy, but yet you don't hold your contractors to a level of accuracy. Well, that's not fair on our side of it. So there's also another big influx of this ditch system that nobody's taken into account from the day one when we push, as I was a big advocate of getting this ditch cleaned out. Obviously, it impacts my property and other properties that are in this area. But is the amount of water that the water treatment plant pushes into this system, but because it's on the private system, I just went by today, you look at the flows of Jewett's Creek before the water treatment plant, and then you go after the water treatment plant, they're significant. And so there's a way more volume in this ditch system that's going down it than 1904 when they constructed this. And when they constructed this, there wasn't berms there in 1904. So this was a level area that they dug through this swamp. And so to say that we're creating additional work, if they ever have to go maintain this ditch, it's no different than the next 1,300 feet. It's no different than anything else that was there. So, like I said, to recap, no, I do not believe that this should be a cost that should be on my shoulders. I think that, like I said, the county itself did level the spoils on the south side of the ditch. Yes, did we level the spoils on the north side of the ditch from who knows when the spoils were dug there? Obviously, I asked that you ask the original landowner that's present in the room today to what it was like. Those spoils are from when they dug out that ditch, and there again, it's poor management of the spoils, it's poor management of the ditch system, and now you're holding me to a standard that I don't think is acceptable, so.
Anything else, Tyler, or is that pretty much your conclusion then? For everything?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. At this time, is there anybody on either engineer, Hannah, Joe, Phil, is there anything that you feel like you should rebuke that Tyler just said, that there may be some differences that we don't understand between what Tyler just said and what you guys did for your comments? I just want clarity for all of us, because when you hear one side, you want to hear it, and I don't mind if you refute anything that Cale has to say. This is what the whole point of public hearing is.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thanks,
Cale?
Mr. Chair. Cale Van Bruggen, Ring Law Firm. I was representing the Drainage Authority at the time that Mr. Service made a claim against the Drainage Authority for some repair work that went outside the original alignment. And Joe, do you have a map of that? Maybe we can put that on the screen. That just showing the ditch system in your report there, slides.
Yeah, there's the slides that you saw, need that, you think would work, otherwise the report, have a copy of the report.
You're looking for this one, Kate? Would this work, or the whole ditch system is it we're looking for?
I think we can use that one will work.
I mean, you can go to Beacon.
And then we'll also, that will work, and I'll refer to, exhibit that Mr. Service has here in his packet. If the board can go to
I think it's like this. Is this the one you're looking for? Picture?
exhibit 4 from Mr. Service's packet, the final page. And I have
They're
a
kind of the
copy
same.
that is the same map, I believe, Mr. Service, maybe you can agree. It's just, from a printer that printed a little bit lighter color, so maybe we can submit that into the record.
Correct.
But I just want to clarify some of the comments from that Mr. Service made about the prior work that was done. So on that back page, you'll see a yellow line north of County Ditch 17. This is it's called in this map, the unapproved ditch alignment that Mr. Service referred to. And the board might remember from when this repair work was going on, that the drainage inspector for the county at the time, in coordination with DNR, had agreed to, instead of following the original alignment in red in that portion, remove cattails and sediment, well, primarily cattails, but aquatic vegetation from a channel that Mother Nature had cut due to lack of maintenance on that original alignment.
Basically, they took the easiest path when they did it, right? They didn't.
That's correct.
Right, so I mean, like, I don't wanna, I think you misstood there when you said you got permission from DNR to construct it that way. Incorrect. Nobody was notified until we actually put a drone in the air and took mapping of what was done and realized that it was done, and then that was when it was brought to the attention.
So I think the issue was that at that time, and the Drainage Authority admitted this to Mr. Service and his attorney, there was no permission from the landowners to do that work there. And so a claim had been submitted against the Drainage Authority. The issue was that the Drainage Authority was facing to get permission or permit from DNR to clean up the original alignment. DNR was going to, it had indicated that it was gonna require the Drainage Authority hire an engineer, complete a fairly expensive survey, and do some modeling work, and that likely, if a permit were to be issued, that it would include a condition that there be some sort of water control structure constructed as part of the repair in order to protect the public water interest, which is regulated by DNR, not regulated by the Drainage Authority. So facing that, the settlement agreement was, which Mr. Service submitted into the record, was a payment to Mr. Service for a recorded easement for that yellow alignment to allow the Drainage Authority to continue doing some limited maintenance excavation for the water to follow that alignment, rather than obligate the cost of the drainage system for the engineering and the water control structure. And then a payment of $10,000, basically. The justification for the board being that could allow flow to continue in County Ditch 17 with the written approval now from the landowner without incurring all the extra costs of the engineering and the permitting and the control structure. During that time, Mr. Service was concerned about the efforts of the contractor downstream of that point. So that would be the area on screen now shown in red. In Mr. Service's exhibit, it's a little bit hard to see on your copy, but it's got the green squiggly lines. This was a map that his attorney submitted to the Drainage Authority to say, on the south side of the ditch, this is where we're concerned about the spreading and leveling of spoil piles. And so Mr. Condon, Mr. Schmalz, myself, and Dean Zimmerly were in communication about that. Also in communication with Jay Rickard, who is the contractor, who went on site and as of November of 2023, had reported back to the Drainage Authority that he believed that the spreading and leveling of spoils on the south side of the bank was to Mr. Service's satisfaction. The work that is being addressed in this hearing, based on the evidence that's in the report on the pictures and the site inspection from January, it's my understanding was done after that point. And so that, either Mr. Service himself or a contractor was hired to come do additional work after the Drainage Authority's contractor had completed spreading the spoils on the south side around November of 2023.
On the north side. And just to be clear, no work was ever done in the ditch channel itself. It was always the contractor leveled the spoils on the north side. The south side spoils were done by the county contractor, Rickard, and the north side was done by us, by our contractor.
Does the board have questions? I just wanted to clarify some of that background. I think we will get additional information about, what the evidence shows as to where the contractor did the work after the county's contractor
And
completed
just,
their work.
and I do want to be clear that the reason that we did the north side was because part of that agreement was we were releasing, I believe, Rickard and who was the other one?
Lake Aquatic, it's in the settlement agreement.
As part of that that we were agreeing to the work that they did.
But, just to be clear for the Drainage Authority, I don't agree that part of that settlement agreement or payment was for authorizing Mr. Service or anybody else to do work beyond the work that Jay Rickard did out on site.
One question, Cale, before you leave, because Tyler mentioned, the $10,000 settlement. We all know that. But if we did go the original course, do we have any estimates of how much that would have cost over the $10,000 or above and beyond? Would it be equal? Would it have been less? Just so the public knows what they would have incurred as far as of a cost would have been.
So do you have any exact numbers?
If we're talking about a survey and DNR coordination for a repair along the original alignment, is that the question?
Yes, please.
Joe, why don't you come up here?
I just want some clarity so not all
What
the
did we
landowners
spend?
understand.
What did we spend on this survey?
I don't have that information in front of me.
The original-
This is my question.
To answer that original question. So if we're looking at a mile or two of the system and we're doing a survey, coordinating with DNR, we're doing test pits to
2,000 lineal feet.
find the original bottom. And, when we do this with the DNR, they like to look at not just an isolated segment, but the entire system, try to tie that back to the original design profiles and come up with a grade and slope and alignment for the entire system. So I mean, just ballpark based on the system size, not just this segment, but the entire system, I'd say 20,000.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Then one question I had too, Cale, as far as the work that Tyler's company did or who you hired to do, were they given authority from the Ditch Authority to do that work? And is that something they need authority from the Ditch Authority? It's just a point of interest because it's kind of
So the work that was completed in November of 2023 was on the portion that's highlighted in red here. That was done by Jay Rickard, paid for by the Drainage Authority as part of the
Okay.
repair and maintenance of the system. That work ended in November of 2023. There's nothing in the record I've seen after that where the Drainage Authority gave any authority to anybody to do additional work on the side slopes or the ditch bank or within the ditch system.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just was thinking about this too. So what is the proper procedure if you're gonna work on a ditch?
Thanks, Commissioner Olberg. The Meeker County actually has a written policy
Yep.
for drainage inspections, and it's pulled from what's in the Drainage Code, Chapter 103E. But if you don't want to read statute and you want to pull up that written policy, it does say in there, you need permission from the Drainage Authority to do work in the drainage system. And that without that permission, all of that work is unauthorized. So if a landowner has a concern that the drainage system is not functioning like it should, that spoil piles haven't been properly spread and leveled, the process is to report that to the drainage inspector so that they can go review it and that they can then address it with a contractor who's approved and hired and authorized by the Drainage Authority.
Thank you.
In some cases, that comes back to the board. In some cases, your drainage inspector, under a certain dollar amount, may have authority to do that work, to get it complete as part of regular yearly maintenance.
So it depends on if it's maintenance or a bigger project, then it comes before us, otherwise there. But You have to have permission before you just go out there and start.
Correct.
What is
Thank you.
deemed the drainage system though? Because nobody was in the actual drainage system. We're talking spoils outside the drainage system. So I think that that's where that fine line gets, you need to make sure that the board has some clarity on that.
So, Mr. Chair, the question about what is the drainage system, it's defined in the drainage code, and in case law, but it's not just top of bank to top of bank. It's the entire ditch channel and the entire right-of-way, which includes the bank, the crown, and the area where the drainage authority at the time the ditch was established acquired right-of-way to spread and level those spoils. And so it extends beyond just the, top of bank to top of bank. It includes also that spoil bank that the drainage authority through this proceeding is concerned, may need to be restored.
Okay, thank you, Cale. Anything else, Tyler? Okay,
Mr. Chair.
sorry.
And
Steve?
maybe, Kale, I just listed off Tyler off your exhibit 1, and I got a little confusion here. I'm gonna read this out, what, at that time, our ditch inspector, not Mac, John Condon responded just, to one of your questions. And, in here, he states, and I recently had a discussion with the Drainage Authority regarding work that has been completed on CD 17 and its results. From CASA 34 to where we met up with the cookie cutter has 0.25 feet of fall. I calculated approximately what the grade should be if we went to original grade, which is another 1.6 feet lower. There is no doubt we would not stay within local WACA regulations and DNR regulations. By dropping the water levels almost 2.5 feet, with the recent work that we completed, we are almost out of wetland regulations already. The Drainage Authority concluded that they will utilize the natural cut reroute that was followed with the cookie cutter machine as repair for CD 17 for the following reasons. And then it states 4 reasons. It's the hydraulic capacity of ditches is close to original as provided, and keeps us within state wetland and public water regulations. Keeps us out of trouble with DNR and local WACA rules. So we can't, basically, everything in here that John Connon at time states, I think, summarizes where the work we did and why we did it, because we have to stay within regulations of the state DNR and WACA. I mean, we can't just go dig what we want because it's a county ditch.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Cale.
The question was raised about whether or not, after the county's contractor completed the repair work on County Ditch 17, whether any unauthorized work was done on the south side of County Ditch 17. And Mr. Schmalz, during his testimony, provided a picture from January 29th, 2024 that shows the backhoe on the south side doing work on the spoil bank. So, maybe there was some question from Mr. Service about, whether the limitations applied only to channel or the full system, but that picture shows that the work was done after the county finished their work, and that's on the south side of that system.
What's the level of what their work that he's doing? So that's the part.
And, as to the level of the work, I think that answer would come from the survey work and information presented by Mr. Lewis.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarity. Thank you, Tyler. And at this time, if anybody from the public would like to come up, if you could just state your name, your address, and what you have to say.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. Thank you for your time. My name's Greg Langmo. I live at 60436 260th Street, otherwise known as the headwaters of County 17. We certainly need these drainage facilities. And if we're going to have them, I say let's keep them up so they work like they were designed. It's been an interesting process of learning that spoils actually have a purpose. But I have to agree with Tyler Service in that we need to establish, my experience, our family owned that property for, well, it was north of 50 years, I think. My recollection is that it was never cleaned since we owned it, and it looked about like it always has. And in walking out there hunting and stuff, it felt to me like it was haphazardly just dumped. Many times in my agricultural experience, I see contractors that don't properly take care of and I think having a berm like that is probably all right, but given, how much slope? You don't need a berm if within a certain amount of slope and a certain amount of upland distance, I don't think you would have a lot of silting. So having these berms and leveled spoil, we're waiting for a report on, is 17 done? I spent an awful lot of money on 17 and 19. They came out maybe 2 years ago on 19, tore down a bunch of trees, piled it up, and haven't been seen since. So I think that some of the people on the ditch are wondering, where are we on this process? I think we're pretty much done down there. What about the rest of it? Is that going to be looked at? I can tell that my neighbor between Mike and the Tensons, Mike Rogers, it bends sharply and it is silting in dramatically. So I was hoping that with the work that we approved and asked to be done, that could be addressed as well to ensure that we don't fill it up down the road. We certainly don't need to be dumping dirt into it at the front end. So anyway, thank you. But having some direction and some updates on when this work will be done would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. To answer any of those Greg questions there, as far as timing, do we have anything for that, Phil or Mac, as far as the rest of 17, just so there's some clarity there?
As far as I know, we don't have anything planned, but we can review the record and see what John left off that didn't complete.
Okay.
Section near 34 that we're discussing was complete. There's gonna be additional work due to the sediment in the system now.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. All right. Anybody else from the public?
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is Tyson Thoroughbred. I own the property, 61-911-300th. This is a separate issue than what is going on right now. And I own the property on the northwest side of Jewett Creek, on 300th. And it's mostly watershed. It's different than with the side banks on both sides, because this is really low-lying. My property goes middle of the creek north. I had bought it in, what was it, June of 19. I had it surveyed in November of the same year. And my issue was with when they came through is that they went from the east side of the creek and they pulled everything the other way, and they kind of straightened it out too, but in my words, they kind of decimated it because we had nice trees along there. It was really on the very west side of the property. It's the bank of the creek, and then it goes really flat, and then in the very middle section going north, it's probably maybe 1.5 to 2 feet, but it kind of meanders to a point on the north end of the property, but it's all low lying, and there is I think there's like a little spring that comes up through there and stuff. And I had really nice trees. I had a really nice tree that was bent over the creek. It wasn't like falling in. It was a live tree and stuff, plus several other ones. And it kind of meandered through and stuff. And when they came through, they just almost a straight shot and just dug down and took all the trees and everything there, and I just, it was kind of nice because it was low lying, because you'd have like wood ducks down there, and I've seen otters down there and muskrats and stuff, and I really like the naturalness of it. And I understand that you have to clean it out, but I thought it was like, it was decimating to the area there and stuff. So, you know, doesn't make sense to put a big bank up there because it's already low-lying stuff there already. But any trees that I had along the creek, everything was gone and stuff. And this is a whole different area and a whole different situation. So I just, I don't know what is acceptable to get, to bring it back somewhat a little bit, or if that's even in the cards or whatnot and stuff. But I know my daughter was really upset. I sent a bunch of photos of before and after also. And so it's not my call to make if it is or isn't an issue. So I just wanted to bring that up, that there's other issues than just that one section that have been affected by this and stuff. And like, we haven't even been back down there since it got tore up. And it's like, you know, you don't see the otters coming through anymore now and stuff. And, you know, it's not like, you know, that was there and stuff. So I don't know. I just wanted to inform you on what's happening and stuff like that. But I love having it being natural, but I also understand that you have to have it accessible for, you know, with cleaning it out and the debris and stuff like that. So there's kind of a fine line, I guess. So, but thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Tyson. I know anybody who owns land that has a county ditch goes through it. That's the downside of it, is that the county ditch still has the authority because they have other landowners that they have to do. And if they're trying to do their job, they're trying to do it right.
Yeah, I just,
And it's,
like, that's why I said, I don't know what is acceptable.
county ditch is very delicate, no matter what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
It is-
Anybody in this room who owns land knows that, so.
Well, I really liked it because it was all low lying and just kind of natural and stuff, and I really liked that and stuff.
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Tyson, for your comments. Anybody else today from the public?
Hi, Kevin Rudd. I don't know, do you want my address?
Nah.
Okay, all right. So my is more just to, something Greg said really got me thinking, because I never realized the spoils had a purpose either, because every time I've been out near a county ditch after work has been done, whether it's been pheasant hunting or deer hunting, or with my son with his bobcat trying to help the landowner maintain some trees and stuff, it's so rough you can't even walk in there. The spoils are just piled and never, from what I see, leveled off where you could possibly do any maintenance on that ditch and whatever. So I would just hope that this would be an opportunity to hold your contractors to a higher standard and actually do the work they're supposed to do out there. I think sometimes they maybe just are maybe moving a little too quickly and don't finish the project off like it probably should be. I'm not saying it's in every case, but from what I've seen, it does need some attention.
Thanks, Kevin.
A written public comment that was submitted to Barb Block,
Okay,
so I can read that to you and then submit it to you as well.
all right, certain.
From Robert Kaplan, trustee of the E.O. Kaplan Trust, to Meeker County Commissioners. Subject, comment on unauthorized alterations to a portion of CD 17. After having to spend $15,000 to $17,000 in ditch assessments the last couple of years, I feel it would be extremely unfair to ask landowners to pay more to restore unauthorized work that has caused damage and needs to be repaired. It would only be fair and reasonable to expect the person doing the unauthorized damage to pay the cost of repair. Regards, Robert Coplin, 12/16/2024.
All right. Thank you, Hannah. At this time, is there anybody else in the public? This is-
Another letter.
Oh, okay. Anybody else in the public? If none, at this time, I will close the public comment portion of this hearing. At this time, I'd like to invite discussion amongst the board regarding the following things of guidance to staff or legal counsel on the investigation of any questions not resolved during the public comment portion of the hearing, or about the comments of the testimony presented regarding restoration of County Ditch 17.
I did not hear any direct evidence showing that there was permission to do the work that was done. And I think Kale alluded to that also in his discussion of the events that transpired. That's my opinion of what I heard today.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
I would agree, that's why I asked what the procedure is, and I see no evidence that it was followed. So I would agree with Paul.
Thanks, Beth. Anything else as far as this goes? And like I said, county ditch is very, very finicky, no matter what. Because here you have a county ditch. When you purchase the land, you gotta understand, hopefully, that there is a county ditch going through it, and thus you will lose some authority over that, because that's where the ditch authority comes into play. And when it comes to private land versus the county ditch, it's a very fine line. And our job as ditch authority is just trying to regulate that ditch, try to keep it maintained if possible, for all the landowners in use. And I think everybody in this room understands that it's a tricky task. That's why you have some lawyers involved and stuff. And where that line is why you have statutes, you know. And I came to the same conclusion that Paul and Beth has, is that I couldn't see anywhere where Tyler was given approval from the ditch authority.
You're asking me to restore something that you guys deliberately done. Did we take?
Our public comment period is done right now, Tyler, and this is just us deliberating amongst the board. I think we got your testimony, and like I said.
Don't forget that you guys leveled the spoils on the south side of the ditch, because I think you're missing that point.
Well, that's not what the issue is right now today, what we're talking about, but, so anybody else have any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'd just add in there though too, because we're the ditch authority, we still have to collaborate with DNR. I mean, we're not the ultimate ditch authority. We have jurisdiction over our ditch up to the partners in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and DNR and the other people in the room have authority over us. So I mean, we don't have say, and that's what I was referring to John Condon's comments, that even if we wanted to dig the ditch as deep as it was maybe originally, we don't always have that authority to do that. So it is not as simple as it seems. And my understanding, you know, when the $10,000 was paid, that was an agreement, and that portion, that case was closed at that point. This is a separate issue. And there was work done there that, nobody has authorization over, or documentation of.
My question was, after the $10,000 payment, easement was agreed upon. So this issue today is about work that has been done since the payment of the $10,000 and the signing of the easement agreement. This is new work that had been done. Am I correct in that?
No, you are incorrect.
I'm getting a no and I'm getting a yes.
Do you have
Before
questions,
the
address
signing
the
of the
Yeah.
settlement agreement.
Commissioner
Yep.
Brennan, if I may.
Sure.
Anna?
this work is separate work than what
Right.
was done. The easement agreement considered work up until that November 2023 date. And further, if you look at the easement document that was provided, it specifically calls out that the easement work that was being considered was that realignment that is highlighted on the easement document that was submitted to the board from Mr. Service. The spoil pile was a separate issue, and as you heard from Phil Schmalz, as you heard from Mac Loken, from Mr. Van Bergen as well, and from Joe Lewis, this is a separate issue. This is with leveling of spoil piles and spreading of the ditch. It is not just where the ditch was dug to begin with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Yep.
Any other discussion amongst the board? At this time, Kale, is there any actions we need to, or Hannah, we need to take in terms of this after our?
Mr. Chair, I would just add to that, the comments that I read before from ditch inspector were from March 7th of 2023 per Exhibit 1 provided by Tyler Zerps.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Kale, Hannah?
Mr. Chair, although I know the hearing has gone long, in light of the new board being seated at the beginning of the year, we set this up today in order to, during the hearing, prepare some draft findings in order for the board to review. So if the board is willing and the chair is willing, if we could take a 5 or 10-minute recess, your staff has the ability to print those draft findings, and then we'd like to review them with the board and see if the board is ready to adopt them today before the board adjourns.
Most definitely. We'll take a 5 to 10 minute break. All right, everybody, if we could reconvene. It's 2:30 or close enough, so. All right.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So as I said earlier before the board went into recess, we endeavored to prepare written findings in order today so that the board who heard the evidence and testimony leading up today could be the board that adopted the final order. So right now, Mr. Chair, what I'd like to do is go through the draft findings and final order. After I review it, we can take any questions or comments the board has. Ultimately, after that review, if the board would like and it's prepared to act, it can approve the draft findings in order. Or if the board would like additional information before it acts, it can recess the hearing and provide some guidance to staff on what additional information you would like before you take final action today.
Okay.
So over the recess, the board was handed a set of draft findings in final order, and I'm going to go through those with the board. If Mr. Chair, if you need to interrupt me and ask questions, please do so. The findings starting on paragraph 1 just note that this board is acting today in its capacity as the drainage authority for County Ditch 17. In paragraph 2, we note that it's the drainage authority under Minnesota statutes chapter 103E that is the sole entity which has the obligation and authority to construct, inspect, repair, or otherwise modify County Ditch 17. We also note that County Ditch 17 benefited landowners may petition the drainage authority to repair, improve, impound, reroute, divert, or abandon the drainage system, but the work cannot occur without the drainage authority's explicit approval in accordance with the procedures and requirements that are outlined in the Drainage Code Statutes Chapter 103E. Paragraph 3, we're going to attach as Exhibit A the February 2nd, 2024 inspection report by Mr. Locken, which is in the record, which notes that as the ditch inspector, he discovered that unauthorized work had been completed on and within the County Ditch 17 right-of-way, and the open ditch of County Ditch 17 had been altered from its as-constructed geometry. The ditch inspector completed this inspection report of the unauthorized modification, and as I said, it would be attached as Exhibit A. In paragraph 4, this is where we note the location of the property. The altered portion of County Ditch 17 is located with parcel ID 12-02-33000 in section 25 of Township 120 North, Range 31 West in Meeker County, and we're referring to that as the service property. Paragraph 5 would just note that the county ditch inspector spoke to the owner of the service property, Tyler Service, regarding the unauthorized alterations, and Mr. Service informed the ditch inspector that he had hired a contractor to perform that work. Turning over to page 2, the Drainage Authority then engaged with legal counsel to determine how to restore the drainage system, and on the advice of its counsel, the Drainage Authority appointed Joe Lewis of Houston Engineering as the drainage engineer to determine the extent of the unauthorized work, the impact that the unauthorized work had on the 17 ditch drainage system, what restoration work was needed to address those impacts, and to draft a restoration report. The restoration report, or the engineer's report that was part of this hearing today, would be attached as Exhibit B. In paragraph 8, subparagraphs A through E, we've pulled this summary from the engineer's report that's in the record. So subparagraph A notes that pre-alteration, the channel's cross-sectional geometry was estimated to be 3 to 4 feet deep, with a bottom width of 4 to 6 feet and a top width of 15 to 20 feet. That the channel's top edge, comprised of spoil from initial construction and subsequent repairs, was flanked by lower wetland prone to inundation and saturation extending 50 to 150 feet on either side of the channel. As a result of that alteration, the spoil bank material was displaced outward from the channel, elevating the surrounding terrain but also reducing the channel's depth to 2 to 2.5 feet, while generally maintaining the original bottom width. This alteration, the engineer noted, was substantially increased the channel's top width for water depths exceeding 2 feet, now measuring 30 to 40 feet at depths of 3 to 4 feet compared to 15 to 20 feet prior to the alteration. In subparagraph C, we note that material removed during the channel widening was leveled adjacent to the ditch to elevate the ground for agriculture activities. The disturbed wetland area now spans a breadth of 150 to 200 feet. Grading was completed on both sides of the ditch for the eastern 600 feet of the ditch and limited to the northern side of the western 650 feet of the altered length. In subparagraph D, we note that the unauthorized alterations present numerous short-term maintenance concerns, including lack of erosion and sediment control measures, causing runoff from the adjacent fields to carry sediment into the ditch channel, increased runoff causing sediment to concentrate in several locations adjacent to the channel and informing minor gullies into the County Ditch 17 channel, which will lead to additional sediment delivery, and the disturbed side slopes of the channel banks along the altered segment create an increased risk of slope instability until the vegetation can be reestablished. And then finally, to note from the report that the unauthorized alterations present numerous long-term maintenance concerns as well, including making accessibility less certain for maintenance as the ground elevations near the channel are lower, less supportive, and subjected to increased inundation or saturated conditions. This would increase the cost of maintenance to the system and reduce the effectiveness of the maintenance bed. In paragraph 9, we refer to the 2 feasible restoration options to restore County Ditch 17 as outlined in the engineer's restoration report. For both options, the work would involve regrading the southern edge of the County Ditch 17 channel to reestablish the soil bank and facilitate access for future inspection and maintenance, and reestablish the soil bank to an elevation approximately 4 feet above the channel bottom. For option 1 in the report, the restoration would establish a vegetation buffer strip at an equivalent elevation as the spoil bank prior to the alteration on the northern side of the channel, 60 to 80 feet from the center of the channel. For option 2 on the northern side of the channel, the spoil bank will also be regraded to reestablish the approximate elevations of the spoil bank prior to the alterations. In paragraph 10, we note that the board met on November 19th at a duly noted and public meeting, and the Drainage Authority adopted findings in order which would be incorporated into this record. At that time, the Drainage Authority found that based on the testimony from the ditch inspector and from evidence in the restoration report, that County Ditch 17 was altered from its as-constructed state without authority from the Drainage Authority and not in conformance with the requirements of Minnesota Statutes Chapter 103E, and that Tyler Service was the responsible party for that unauthorized work. The Drainage Authority ordered the staff to send Mr. Service and other landowners benefited by County Ditch 17 notice regarding the Drainage Authority's findings and the engineer's proposed restoration options, and invite Mr. Service to appear at today's hearing. The Meeker County Auditor did send Mr. Service and other benefited landowners on County Ditch 17 notice of the hearing today, and evidence of that notice is incorporated into the board's record of proceedings. The board held its hearing today, starting at 1 o'clock. The hearing was recorded, and that recording, from which a written transcript may be created, is incorporated into the board's record for today's hearing as well. Starting at paragraph 16, we note that at the hearing, your legal counsel presented the background information on the prior proceedings regarding the damage to County Ditch 17 and the November 19th, 2024 meeting. The county engineer discussed the repair work completed in 2023 on this portion of County Ditch 17 compared to the unauthorized work completed in 2024, and that the ditch inspector summarized the evidence from the inspection report presented to the Drainage Authority, and additional evidence presented to the Drainage Authority at its November 19th meeting. Finally, Engineer Lewis presented the restoration report to the Drainage Authority. Starting with paragraph 17, we've attempted to summarize some of the testimony from your county highway engineer, Mr. Schmalz. And again, there's a recording of that testimony, but as proposed, it's been summarized as followed. Mr. Schmalz testified that the Drainage Authority completed a redetermination of benefits on County Ditch 17 and afterwards ordered the maintenance and repair of County Ditch 17, which included work on the portion of the ditch system which bisects Mr. Service's property beginning in May of 2022. In early 2023, Meeker County hired 2 contractors to complete the repair work, Rickard Excavating and Lakes Aquatic Weed Removal. Paragraph 18, we just note that the contractor was again on site at the service property on November 1st, 2023 to further level those spoils based on a complaint from Mr. Service. On November 9th, 2023, the contractor indicated that they had met on site with Mr. Service and that the spoils were now leveled to Mr. Service's satisfaction. The Meeker County engineer explained that the final spoils leveling was done with a dozer and that Meeker County's contractor did not do any work on the north side of the ditch, nor did they rip up the vegetated south ditch edge with this operation. Your engineer testified that the unauthorized work beyond the work completed by the county's contractor was identified in January of 2024. The county engineer explained he did view the property prior to the unauthorized work. The unauthorized work on the ditch system occurred after the approved repair and was distinct from the work completed by the county's contractor in 2023. This was done after the approved County Ditch 17 work was completed, was done on both sides of the ditch. The unauthorized work removed the bend in County Ditch 17, and the unauthorized work reduced the height of the County Ditch 17 bank. And then finally, noting your engineer testified that the work done by the county's contractor in 2023 was different from the unauthorized work and damage. Your county engineer provided aerial images and photographs of the service property in the area of concern prior to the county contractor's work, and also showed photographs of the unauthorized work itself being completed. The county engineer also showed photos of the impact the unauthorized work had in the spring of 2024 during the spring thaw, snow melt, and spring rains. At paragraph 21, we just note that the county drainage inspector, Mac Loken, testified at today's hearing on some of the impacts the unauthorized work has caused, including soil erosion, gullies, and sediment delivery into the drainage system, all of which will increase future maintenance costs. Starting in paragraph 2022, we've provided a brief summary of the testimony from Engineer Lewis, including in subparagraph A, the documents, the slide deck that he submitted, summarizing the findings in his report and showing photos of the ditch system before and after the unauthorized work. And then in subparagraphs B through F, this includes a similar summary to what was pulled from the report and has already been reviewed with the board in the previous finding, paragraph 8. In paragraph 23, Engineer Lewis explained there's 2 feasible restoration options. For both options, the work would involve regrading the southern edge of the channel to reestablish the spoil bank and facilitate access for future inspection and maintenance, and reestablishing the spoil bank to an elevation approximately 4 feet above the channel. And then we include again for option 1, the restoration would establish a vegetation buffer at an equivalent elevation as the spoil bank prior to the alteration on the northern side of the channel, 60 to 80 feet from the center of the channel. For option 2, on the northern side of the channel, the spoil bank will also be regraded to reestablish the approximate elevations of the spoil bank prior to the alterations. Then in paragraph 24, we note that Mr. Service was given an opportunity to present evidence. He submitted 7 exhibits to the board, along with a table of contents with an additional comment in writing, a copy of meeting notes, a settlement agreement, and a drainage easement between Mr. Service and the Drainage Authority, and then also a copy of the notice dated November 19th that was sent to Mr. Service for this hearing. Subparagraph A through C, I just attempted to summarize some of the high points from Mr. Service's testimony, although all of his comments are in the recording for the record. In subparagraph A, I summarized that Mr. Service testified that during the Drainage Authority's maintenance and repair work on the ditch system, the Drainage Authority severed Mr. Service's property. He testified that as a part of the settlement negotiations, he was paid $10,000, or the alternative was the Drainage Authority to pay $15,000, and that then Mr. Service would level the spoil piles on his own. He referenced and submitted as exhibits emails between himself and Mr. John Condon, the former drainage inspector, the Meeker County Drainage Inspector, Mr. Service's attorney, Dean Zimmerly, and myself, Cale Van Bruggen, as the Drainage Authority's attorney. He testified that County Ditch 17 was 6 feet wide at the bottom and 11 to 16 feet at the top, depending on the depth of that section, prior to the recent work. He testified that further upstream of County Ditch 17, the drainage system is not currently constructed to the ASIC, that's the as-constructed subsequently improved condition of the drainage system. He testified that here his contractor did spread and level the spoils on the north side of County Ditch 17 because he was unhappy with the work that was done. I proposed some responses to Mr. Service's testimony in subparagraph A of paragraph 25, that the settlement agreement and drainage easement between the Drainage Authority and Mr. Service, the settlement agreement and drainage easement agreement address maintenance and repair work further upstream from where the unauthorized work was completed outside of the original County Ditch 17 alignment, and that these issues have been settled between the Drainage Authority and Mr. Service. In subparagraph B, finding that Mr. Service was unhappy with the spreading of the leveling of spoils completed by the county's contractor in the area of concern described in the engineer's report. The county's contractor worked with Mr. Service to address his concerns with spreading and leveling of the repair and maintenance spoils. However, the record shows that the work was completed around November of 2023. The unauthorized work was conducted after November of 2023, including in January of 2024, and was not authorized by the Drainage Authority. The Meeker County Highway Engineer reviewed the work after it was completed by the county contractor, and again after the alleged unauthorized work, and testified at the public hearing that the alleged unauthorized work was done after the county contractor completed the repair and maintenance work on County Ditch 17. Photos were submitted by Mr. Smalls, including photos showing the unauthorized work occurring on the south side of the drainage system. And then a note that would be in the recording that Attorney Van Bruggen testified as to the history of the settlement agreement, drainage easement agreement, and the county contractor work that ended in November of 2023. In paragraph 26, the Drainage Authority opened the hearing to public comments. We do again have a recording of those comments, but I've included in subparagraphs A and D a notation of the comments by Mr. Greg Langmo, Mr. Tyson Thoroughbred, Mr. Kevin Rupp, and Mr. Robert Kaplan. Mr. Langmo testified that he's awaiting for a report on whether the repair work on County Ditch 17 is complete and about additional repair needs on the County Ditch 17 drainage system. Mr. Thoroughbred testified to his dissatisfaction with the repair work that was done on his portion of property crossed by County Ditch 17. Mr. Rupp testified that he was not aware spoil piles were part of the drainage system and that the spoil piles are often left in rough condition and that the contractors should be held to a higher standard. Mr. Kaplan submitted a written comment to Barb Locke, which attorney Hannah Shackrell Jansen read into the record. The comment requested the Drainage Authority charge the costs of correcting the unauthorized work to the responsible party. And again, the full summary of those comments would be captured by the recording for the hearing today.
Hey, Cale, just for reference, they didn't spell Greg's last name right, and it's Kevin Root, not Rupp.
Oh, thank you. So I do have,
R-O-O-T. Unless Kevin doesn't want to be involved in there, we'll keep it at Rupp.
I do have in the copy in front of me a strikeout of Lang, changed to Langmo, and then thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Strikeout Rupp and change to Rupp. In paragraph 7, just notice that, or note that following the close of the public comment portion of the hearing, the board deliberated the evidence in the record and the public comment testimony. During these deliberations, commissioners noted that there's no evidence in the record that the work completed as described in the engineer's report was authorized by the Drainage Authority. Paragraph 28, we recommend a finding that the Drainage Authority finds that the comments from the public landowners did not directly address whether unauthorized work on County Ditch 17 is complete and whether the drainage system unauthorized work should be restored. Paragraph 29, note that the Drainage Authority finds the system has been altered from its as-constructed state without authority from the Drainage Authority and not in conformance with the provisions of Minnesota Statutes Chapter 103E. In paragraph 30, a recommended finding that Tyler Service is the responsible party for the unauthorized work. In paragraph 31, finding that Tyler Service had no explicit or implicit authority to alter the County Ditch 17 drainage system. In paragraph 2, the Drainage Authority finds that the restoration options presented by the appointed drainage engineer are necessary, feasible, and beneficial for the health and utility of the system. And in paragraph 33, the Drainage Authority finds that restoration of County Ditch 17 is within the scope of the Drainage Authority's explicit authority to maintain drainage systems in statutes 103E.011 subdivision 11, statutes chapter 103E in Minnesota law. The order includes paragraphs A through D. The order as proposed would be that the Drainage Authority confirms the need for restoration of Meeker County Ditch 17 and orders the restoration of the portion of County Ditch 17 as depicted in the restoration report. Paragraph B would be that the Drainage Authority directs Joe Lewis and Houston Engineering to prepare plans and specifications for construction of the project and to advertise for bids for the restoration's construction. Paragraph C, the Drainage Authority orders the county treasurer to assess Tyler Service all costs incurred as a result of investigating and restoring the unauthorized work, including but not limited to engineering fees, legal fees, costs of noticing the hearing, and construction costs. And in paragraph D, the Drainage Authority authorizes its staff to take all actions necessary to implement the restoration, reserving to itself those functions and actions required by law to be taken by the Board of Commissioners. I should clarify, maybe in addition to paragraph A, that the recommended restoration is, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's option 1. Is that correct?
Option
2.
Option B.
Yep. So I would propose adding to paragraph A as depicted in the restoration report as option 2. Mr. Chair, I know that was lengthy, and because the board didn't have an opportunity to advance, obviously, I wanted it to be thorough, the review, and give the board a chance to review it. Do you or any commissioners have questions on the draft findings and order?
Anybody have any questions for Kale at this moment?
I don't.
Okay.
Hearing no questions, Mr. Chair, again, to review the options, if the board would like additional information at this time, then it could do so by requesting to recess the hearing. It'd be good to provide a date and time. If the board doesn't need additional information and it's ready to approve the draft findings in order, you could do so by motion to approve the draft findings in order, and that would be voted on by roll call vote.
Okay, thank you, Kale.
I have no need for additional information.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. With that said,
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the findings and order, ordering the restoration of CD 17 as depicted in the restoration report and directing the Meeker County Treasurer to assess all costs to Tyler Service.
okay.
Mr. Chair, I second the motion.
Motion made by Paul Johnson, second by Beth Oberg. Any further discussions? Okay, with that said, Corey, could you do the roll call?
Commissioner Oberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Bredesen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Schiefelbein?
Yes. With that said, the motion passes. And
That's the last item on the agenda, Mr. Chair. Unless you have anything further, then should have a motion to adjourn before we end today.
Yep, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I so move that we adjourn today's meeting.
Julie, it's your last motion.
Julie's last motion,
Second.
second by Steve. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, everybody.